The tan bin arrived in Newcastle on the 18th of February to take on medical equipment collected by Newcastle Overseas Aid. Since then, the vessel has remained here under a Department of Transport impounding order. The department is demanding that the vessel undergo about $1 million in repairs before it sails. Today, the ship's captain invited NBN aboard to see that some superficial repairs were being done by the crew. He says safety features have been upgraded on the understanding that major repairs would be done at the first opportunity after the vessel's departure. But the crew can't possibly hope to carry out the major repairs required by the Transport Department. And late today there was more bad news. A spokesman for Transport Minister Bob Brown revealed that the latest hull report has just arrived at the Minister's office. He wouldn't give details, but he added rather ominously that the result was not good. The department says there's little chance of the tan bin going anywhere for some time. Mr Brown has described the situation as disappointing for both the volunteer aid group and the Vietnamese government, which urgently needs the medical supplies. In the meantime, a spokesman for the Embassy of Vietnam in Canberra says his government is still negotiating to find a way out.
Under the proposal, Westpac, which has already owed $300,000, would become the owners of the vessel, though Newcastle Regional Maritime Museum would act as trustees. The plan comes after many unsuccessful attempts to meet debts of $400,000. Though the vessel was built mostly from public donations and grants to commemorate our shipbuilding and engineering heritage, it has failed to make money. And if Westpac turn down this offer, what will have to happen to it?
Well, that will be an option Westpac will have to pick up, but I can see that would be sold and lost to the city forever.
Is it close to being sold to a private buyer?
I think so. The official manager, Ian Campbell, has tried particularly hard to get sponsorship within Newcastle, but there's every indication that there's going to be no sponsorship forthcoming, so it'll be very quickly sold to interests outside Newcastle.
Captain McLeod and the volunteer crew will continue to donate their services if Westpac does take on the vessel. The ship could operate 24 hours a month, making a profit of around $40,000 a year. But her design makes her expensive and difficult to manoeuvre.
I'm one of the pilots in the port of Newcastle, and I find the ships of 100,000 tonnes more easy to manoeuvre quite often than William IV.
He believes she would be more suitable as a training vessel out at sea. Today, Westpac's regional credit manager, Paul Little, refused to comment on any possible decision. Meanwhile, all those involved keep their fingers crossed for a favourable announcement.
No, I think sentiment comes into it a lot. That the first ship that was built in Newcastle in the early days was the William IV, and whilst we haven't got the original, we've got part of history, and I think we've got to do everything we can to maintain it.
Former Newcastle Test players Graham Calling, Gary Gilmore, Jim DeCourcy and Johnny Watkins will link up with a who's who of Aussie cricket for the fundraising match. Dungog's dashing Doug Walters joins former captain Ian Chappell, Neil Harvey, Norm O'Neill, Ian Craig, Jim Higgs, Brian Tabor and many more, with special guests Alan McGilvray, Arthur Morris and Norman May. A big contingent of local cricketers of the modern era will also take part in the day, which is expected to raise in the vicinity of $40,000. Next Tuesday night at the Western Suburbs Leagues Club, a sports auction will be held with Norman May as the compere and special guests Joe Bugner, Craig Johnston and Jack Newton, along with a host of sporting greats from the Hunter. For the keen collector of sporting memorabilia, it sounds like a smorgasbord.
Well, we've got the Swans. The Sydney Swans have signed a ball and one of their jumpers. We've got some signed cricket bats from the Pakistanis. Steffi Graf signed one of her T-shirts. We've got Wally Lewis's jumper. We've got Max Walker's shoes, just all sorts of things.
And ticket sales have been a little bit slow at this stage?
Yes, they have. We're a little bit disappointed. I mean, we're trying to boost sales at the moment. We're just hoping that people will sort of rally together and come along on the night. It's going to be a fabulous night.
For Newcastle's Lord Mayor John McNaughton, sports people are once again rallying to the cause.
The sporting public, I don't believe, have much to give back. They give enough as it is. It's wonderful, and I say this all the time. Our society is so enriched by sport that those people do their job just doing what they do and do it well.
There's hardly a sign of last night's drama now. The rail cars have taken their load north to Queensland. Only a few sad fragments mark the scene. Police were first at the crash site at 8 o'clock last night. The driver, a 34-year-old Madawi man, and his daughter were out of the van. A 10-year-old boy was trapped. He died before rescuers could free him. Police say the van was heading south on Teal Street when it failed to take the corner onto Cormorant Drive. It clipped the gutter, missing a power pole by a fraction before skidding more than 20 metres into the rail cars. Southbound traffic was light, but police were needed to direct a stream of vehicles leaving the city after Thursday night trading. The father and daughter were taken to Royal Newcastle Hospital for treatment of minor injuries. It's understood the family was going to the Mater Hospital to visit their mother, who had just given birth to a new baby.
With a federal election less than a fortnight away, visiting high-profile politicians are commonplace in the Hunter. But while most candidates are spending their time fighting their campaigns on federal issues, sitting member and Labor candidate for the seat of Newcastle, Alan Morris, teamed up with Bob Carr today to spend the day catching up on several contentious state issues. Mr Morris even went so far as to introduce Mr Carr to a press conference at Newcastle railway station this afternoon. Mr Carr returned the compliment by doing a bit of federal politicking for the benefit of the Morris campaign.
We're making the point that the things the Greiner government has done in the last 2 years would be precisely the same as the Peacock government would do if the coalition were elected on March the 24th.
The platform conference was the last stop for Mr Carr, and with the alleged SRA expense account rort still a hot potato amongst rail unions, Mr Carr was sought out by several station workers. Most were concerned about job security and in particular the future of the Broadmeadow to Newcastle rail line, and there Mr Carr was quick to tell them what they wanted to hear.
In this area there are going to be further cuts, and we suspect that the service from Broadmeadow to Newcastle is going to be one of those. Now, it is a service that I would restore as Premier if this government takes it away.
Newcastle City Council is scouring Australia and the world for guidelines on building standards in earthquake-prone areas. Despite the risk of another earthquake being minimal, the council is taking no chances with public safety. Of concern are unsupported brick parapets which collapsed during the earthquake. The awnings held up with tie rods will also come under the spotlight after the tragedies in Beaumont Street. Repair work being carried out at the moment will have to comply with the new standards or be pulled down in the future. This retrospective power will also apply to buildings not damaged by this quake, but considered susceptible to a further shock.
With the existing ones, they're the ones that are more likely to come under some form of retrospective regulation to make sure that, once again, that they're tied back and won't be a danger to the public should we get another earthquake.
When you say retrospective legislation, are you saying that if somebody builds something and it's not, in your view, earthquake-proof, they'll be forced to bring it down?
Or provide certain construction requirements to satisfy us. I mean, some of the awnings that may not have come down in this earthquake could come down another one. Of course, they pose a very serious risk to the public.
Major building work may be given up to 7 years to comply, but with minor alterations, the council orders may demand immediate attention. John Church, NBN News.
Coroner Darryl Field found that Gabriel Marie Leslie died from injuries sustained while alighting from a rapidly ascending balloon. He found that the pilot, David Leslie Bowers, died from electrical shock following the balloon's collision with power lines. The verdict comes at the end of a 2-day inquest into the ballooning tragedy on October 15 last year. Passengers on board the ill-fated flight, together with on-ground eyewitnesses, police and air safety experts, gave evidence to the inquiry. Today, air safety investigator John Reardon agreed the pilot ensured the safety of his passengers to the very end. But in later evidence, he said his technique was probably alien to every balloon pilot. The mitigating circumstance was the death of his friend, a balloon pilot who died a week before on power lines. While some of the evidence was conflicting, the coroner said the overall picture was that David Bowers had limited vision of the power lines and little opportunity to observe their change of direction. He ruled that one or both of the conductors earthed, killing the pilot. The balloon then sailed off, its remaining passenger falling from a significant height. In his recommendations, the coroner urged that hot air balloons carry a large-scale chart showing known danger points, including power lines, that the pilot should always be accompanied by an observer, and finally the fitting of a non-conductive device to the outside of hot air balloons.
Strength through unity. That's the motto of the United Mine Workers Federation of Australia. After 20 years of talking, this union was formed from two former mining unions, the Miners Federation and Mining Mechanics. Now Australia's 35,000 miners are covered by 5 unions instead of 6. But the aim is for a single organisation.
Where you have 5 current unions in the industry, each and every union is out to get the best that's possibly achievable for their members. We see the position as one union that can be done for the benefit of every member.
The push for one voice coincides with the 75th anniversary of the former Miners Federation and the centenary of the Northern District Miners Federation. 700 miners from around Australia will join international delegates in Cessnock this weekend for the celebrations.
It's a very proud time, and we've had a lot of the old retired people come in over the last couple of days and reminiscing over what had taken place over the last 25, 30, 40 years that they've been involved, and there's been some very, very heartwarming stories amongst them.
He may have been preaching to Newcastle's converted, but John Howard mustered his best oratory skills as he spoke at a lunch in support of Liberal candidate for Newcastle, Mark Hallett. Conscious of Andrew Peacock's recent bad press over uncosted election promises, Mr Howard's recurring theme today was to deal with issues rather than what he described as mind-boggling statistics.
Just because we can't supply the budgets in years 2 and 3, we've supplied it in year 1. Just because we can't supply it in years 2 and 3, you've got just about every hack around the country saying that we're not coming clean.
Mr Howard spoke of Australia's international debt problem and the accompanying high interest rates as the most important issues in this election campaign.
And I don't come here today saying that if you elect a Liberal government on the 25th of March, interest rates are suddenly going to come down. They're not. And none of us are pretending that. Andrew Peacock's not pretending it, John Hewson's not pretending it, and I'm not pretending it. But what we are pretending is that we will at least attack the problem at its root.
A change of venue and Mr Howard addressed a second luncheon. This one a ladies-only affair at a historic homestead at Bulwarra near Maitland. Here the tone was more subdued. Less talk of foreign account deficits, more of education, health and welfare. With only a 3.6% swing needed to topple sitting member for Hunter Eric Fitzgibbon, Mr Howard spoke confidently of a win by Liberal candidate Ashley Saunders. And as for the reports of Andrew Peacock's lack of credibility, the one-time Liberal leader remained loyal to his successor.
Naturally, I don't agree with that. And we have a well-thought-out program. We have people who can implement it. We have an enormous reservoir of talent in the Liberal Party, and I'm very confident we'll form a very good government.
It was early afternoon when teenage schoolgirl Alice said goodbye to friends and headed home along a laneway towards Baker Street. Police now believe she was being watched very closely. A man in his mid-20s approached her asking the time. Alice was anxious but uncertain and allowed the man to get close enough to grab her. Within seconds, he dragged her into his car where she struggled violently. Before he could close the door, she kicked him hard in the face and used the valuable time to scramble across the seat and out through the passenger side door. Alice is safe, but police say this man will try again.
He could have been watching this particular lane over a period of time and found that it was frequented by school children going home. I think at this stage that the children's safety is most paramount, and that's why we need to catch up with this person.
Alice was able to give police a good description of her attacker. He had heavy acne scarring and a distinctive mole on his left cheek. He is described as being in his early 20s, with dark hair, 175 centimetres tall, of heavy build, and was wearing a green T-shirt and dark jeans. The car he was driving was an early model Tirana sedan with mag wheels and a rear spoiler. Alice couldn't tell police the registration number, but she believed it did have an X in it. If you recognise this man or the vehicle he was driving, call police on the Crime Stoppers number now, 008 422 199.
Taylor ran into an informed Kirrily Sharp of Australia, and the first set wasn't a contest at all as Sharp raced through without conceding a game. Sharp used all the court to totally demoralise her opponent. But the youngster from Maitland showed plenty of grit and determination in the second set. Taylor's game lifted and Sharp had to call on all her experience to eventually take the set and the match 6-love, 7-6. 9 of the quickest sailing craft in the world were on Lake Macquarie this afternoon to show their wares, but light breezes hampered their quest for top pace. The 18-foot skiffs have thrilled crowds on Sydney Harbour for years, and today was one of their rare sojourns out of the city. 2 short races were sailed, and then a longer race in winds that did stiffen. And at the end of the day, 2 boats tied for first. Bank of New Zealand is the current world champion, and skippered by Scott Ramsden, she sailed superbly to force a tie with Xerox, skippered by Phil Barnett. Blacksmith's Beach was a sea of colour as thousands of spectators and competitors blended together to make it a real carnival atmosphere. On the beach, Australian sprint champion Darren Peters was all the rage, and he won as favourites should. In surf that was vastly different from the previous 2 days, competition was fierce but fair, and Todd Borland from the North Wollongong Club made the better finish to nudge out Manly's Ian Gardner in the open ski race. Host club Swansea Belmont had a tremendous final day, and in the Taplin event it was a one-horse race. Sean Davis gave the team a flying start in the swim, and then Nick Todd Hunter hit the water to increase the lead. By the time Drew Blatchford and Graham Burge paddled their boards, it was a case of stay on for the win, and they did just that, handing over to Tim Allen and Greg Kelly for the ski section. It was Kelly who had the honour of crossing the line to give the club a great win. Red-hot favourites Bulli dominated the open boat race, as they have done for some time. Warriewood pushed the champions all the way, but in the end it was Bulli from Warriewood and South Maroubra. State Sports Minister Robert Rowland Smith was on hand to watch the big events of the day and was impressed with the team's display in the march past. But the huge crowd was eager for the Ironman events, and the junior contest was another triumph for Swansea Belmont. Drew Blatchford is being touted as a future Open champion, and today he blitzed his junior rivals. He hit the beach to the wild applause from the crowd, and he was first across the line. Scott Mason of the Newcastle club and Matthew Rees of Swansea Belmont provided the extra placings to give Newcastle the trifecta. In the open Ironman, it was a battle of the rival camps. Darren and Dean Mercer had been criticised for not joining the Uncle Toby's Breakaway series, and with many competitors from that series in the field, including Swansea's Guy Andrews, it was time to put up or shut up. Andrews was ashen-faced as he started the race, with much pride at stake. Sean Kenny was first to turn after the swim leg, with Andrews right on his hammer. Then Darren Mercer set about conquering the field. With a sensational board leg, Mercer had set up a winning break at the start of the ski leg and was never in serious trouble from then on. The champion of the Nutrigrain series strode away to win by a handsome margin, with Guy Andrews in second spot and Dean Mercer third. For Darren, he answered his critics in the best possible way.
There's been a lot of things happening in the press, as you know, leading up to these final races, the state and the Australian, and I've been on the end of it, and I'm out to prove something this weekend.
The location decided on for the event was the Wyndham Estate Winery beside the Hunter River just out of Branxton. Liberal Party members gave Mr Peacock a standing ovation as he arrived for the lunch and applauded again enthusiastically when he talked of raising the tax-free threshold on superannuation, of working towards lower inflation and interest rates and increasing the production capacity of the country.
They will continue high interest rates, and a vote for Labor is a vote for high interest rates. There's no other conclusion.
A lighter moment came when Wyndham Estate presented Mr Peacock with the latest in its Prime Minister Port series, bearing a label showing the present opposition leader. Wyndham executives quickly added that it's not in production and they did not wish to give the impression they back a particular side. At a news conference afterwards, Mr Peacock would not be drawn on specifics about the Hunter electorate, avoiding discussion on the future of the Coal Industry Tribunal and the Joint Coal Board.
Oh, well, I've indicated my view on that. I've got no further comments to make than when I was here last time and the other comments I made in regard to the industry itself.
In summary, what are they then?
Well, we've got to free the situation up, as you well know, and I think, in fact, everyone will benefit as a consequence.
But Mr Peacock is confident the 3.6% swing needed to unseat Labor's Eric Fitzgibbon would be achieved.
Hunter, I think, is certainly going to fall to us. I think Ashley will be an outstanding member, but it will give, in the person of Ashley, with undoubtedly infinitely greater representation than is occurring at the present moment.